White Noise by Corrosion and Conformity. I'm just going to come out and say it and say that this song was hard. So I want to give you a tip. Utilize YouTube's slow playback feature, and when you're actually going to be playing along, maybe through your amp with a decent amount of volume and gain, and if you're going to be playing through your phone, hopefully the MP3 app that you have on your phone also has a feature to slow the song down. Because initially I was playing this thing at 50% speed for a while, and at least for a week I was at 85% of speed. So the tempo on this song is very quick. And by taking the time of playing along with it at these slower speeds, it'll help you kind of build the muscle memory that may be necessary for you, may not be, but it was for me to play the song at full tempo. There's an interesting thing, speaking about tempo, and me not being big into music theory, just being a metal guitarist, and I'd like to go in there and just knock the stuff out. But something they did, which I suspect adds to the feel of the tempo and the pace of the song, is if you look at the first riff at 0.1 seconds, that thing repeats itself like 6 times. But right before it transitions into the next riff, it drops the last note and starts on the next riff. So that was it was a little challenging to not finish off the riff after you've played it multiple times, where you're just dropping off that note and going to the same thing. But I think it adds to this feel of urgency that just goes along with the fast tempo of the song. So I had mentioned to utilize the slowdown features of YouTube and on your MP3 player, for the obvious reason of starting slow and building up speed. But this song impressed upon me to a level that it's never really stood out to me before. And I'll kind of give you the visual of it. So I'm working on this song and I'm playing it for a week. And there's a couple sections where I just can't get in the pocket. I can't even get close to it. And I'm kind of often stumbling around on it. And I figure, okay, I gotta work on it. I just gotta go over and over and over, and eventually I'll get it. And my tempo was getting pretty high, so I was about full speed on the song. So I'm like, okay. I ended up sitting back down, utilizing YouTube, putting it in at 50% again, and just going through it note by note. And it turns out that at least in 2 places, I'm sure you guys will find more, I transcribed it a little off. And what that told me was, wow, no matter how much you try to compensate to get on time and sound good, if it's off, it's off. And sometimes it's slightly off. And it made me think of how many riffs over the years were transcribed incorrectly. Could I have learned that Megadeth riff or some other band of playing caliber if I was playing it slow and if it was transcribed correctly, assuming that maybe a note or two is off, which really isn't uncommon. So I want to plant that seed with you, where if you're working on something and it's not coming together, but you can get most of the other song, maybe it's transcribed wrong. Sit back and maybe pick it apart for yourself if you're following someone else's work, or re-go through your work. Because I'm finding with Corrosion and Conformity, and who knows if other bands will fall in suit, is, for lack of a better description, they adhere to a certain kind of playability and technique. And if you're able to do most of it, but just all of a sudden something ain't working, well, maybe it's not that they just cut and pasted in a riff that was in their catalog that's just really freaking hard. Maybe there's a couple notes off. So if you're running into that challenge of getting on time and nailing the riff and it sounded just like the original, slow down. Go to the 50%, hear it note for note. Make sure that the slide you're doing really is a slide. The pull-off that you're doing really is a pull-off. Is it upstroked or downstroked? You know, those little nuances that if we're playing at regular tempo, we may just kind of be overlooking. And just correcting those little nuances and how we're attacking the riff may be the key that unlocks you actually nailing it for the first time and consecutively after that. So let's get into talking about how to attack some of these riffs. The riff at 0.01 seconds. This was unique in that everything on the fifth string, they were rolling their thumb over for an artificial harmonic, and it was kind of hit or miss of whether the note was ringing with a harmonic or not. And so as you're playing the song, know that every downstroke on that, get your thumb in there, get a little bit of harmonic. If it gets triggered or not, it doesn't matter because it kind of seemed a little hit or miss on the album. And pay attention to the upstroke caret that I have on there, because obviously that note gets emphasized without the harmonic, because you can't really roll your thumb over from the other direction, and that sounds like what they're doing. Okay, now take a look at the riff starting at 1 minute and 43 seconds. If you see at the beginning, there's a slide with a quick little palm mute and then what would be an open E, depending on if you were tuned to E. I want to point that out because that's what's also kind of unique about this song. You know, I mentioned earlier, like the transition between riffs, they'll drop the last note. That's unique about the song. It has a sense of urgency. But that little slide and alternate picking, and then you'll notice that there's a lot of slides that go from the 7th fret downwards that are intermixed between the riffs. I call this the MSG of this song, the monosodium glutamate, meaning that these little additions are what's really adds some additional flavor to what would already be in the riff. And this MSG that they're adding, it was a challenge because sometimes they do it, sometimes they don't, and you really gotta remember it. And actually, I think at one point in my playthrough, like usual, I forgot where they did it and where they did or did not do it, so I just played it. So you'll notice that in this song that there's all kinds of sprinkled MSG in between these riffs, and it just adds to it. It adds busyness, and the irony is that it will be one of the things that really kind of keeps you moving while you're playing the song. You know, it's not like the riffs are slow, but when you're adding this little additional flavor that they've got going on with these like little slides and fills and additional patterns of alternate picking, it keeps you on your toes, because it's hard to remember which riff they did it in, didn't do it in. And also, getting back to this one at 1 minute and 43 seconds, it just feels faster than the flow that precedes it. And so it gives it an extra challenge. It's like you're kind of operating at, let's just say, 8 notes, and all of a sudden you got to throw in some little 16th note fill. And it's demanding of you to get in there and do something a little quicker pace than what you were just leading up to it with. So that was a challenge as well. Tab sheet 4. As I look at this, everything on this sheet reminds me of how I had to build up to play it at speed. I had to play this slow, and I had to play it a lot to get up to speed. So yeah, every riff on this sheet, pay attention to each note. Hopefully I transcribed it good enough, and you may have to build up your speed. The outro riff, which starts at 3 minutes and 38 seconds. This riff was a challenge, and it was a challenge because I don't like counting riffs, and you have to count this unless your ear can pick up on some nuances with the lyrics or the drums to give you the cue of when to change into the last variation of this riff. So pay attention to the two variations, and the last one is just subtly different. It's kind of ends, it goes from opposed to like 6/7 on the last notes, it goes to 6/5. And yeah, I had to count it, and maybe you won't have to, or maybe counting is irrelevant to you and it's second nature. But that was something where by the time I got to the end of the song, I just kind of wanted to play and have it done, and then all of a sudden I'd be in the middle of it and I'm like, oh, I haven't been counting, and the cues are hard to pick up on. I might miss it. So the trick to it is don't get complacent when you get there. Count it out.